Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. So if you can't hear it in my voice, I'm slightly under the weather today. My lovely children gifted me with a cold, so I have been fighting that a bit, but I'm on the mend, feeling a little bit better, but I might sound a little bit goofy today. If you're watching on YouTube, you may notice an extremely different background as well. So big news, big changes for our family. Finally moved into our new home and I have started to set my office up. So I think last week, if you watched, you saw me in my living room at the kitchen counter so you could see the background of the living room. Today, I am in the nook of the corner of my basement, which is my new office/podcast studio. So it's still rough. It is painted. And I have shelves, but there are no decorations yet. So you're getting version, I don't know what version we're on yet, but in the home, you're getting version 2.0. So believe it or not, this relates a little bit to what we were talking about or what I'm going to talk about today. Before I was a business coach, I was a plant manager. Before I was a plant manager, I was a continuous improvement manager, expert, whatever you want to call it. We had a title for it in the business that I was in. But basically, I was the resident expert of your lean manufacturing and responsible for taking teams and putting them through change and getting like the solutions put in. So I would, support the production manager and the plant manager by taking teams through Kaizen events and getting the solutions implemented and rolled out, and then help to support upholding the systems afterwards. This was very fun. I loved this work, mostly because I got to work with the teams and I got to work with them on creating new things. But one of my favorite parts about, especially during the training, but also when we would have conferences and we would go and we try to learn, was visiting other facilities and seeing what they were doing and trying to take an idea they had and implement it at our facility. It was super fun using working genius language. It definitely took my genius of discernment, and I have the enablement genius, which is right after galvanizing. So it was like another form of galvanizing for me. So it was, or being galvanized, I guess. And so it really allowed me to use my E as well as my D. So it was a quite lovely, wonderful thing and obviously fun. So I would come back to the plant. I'd have all these pictures and I'd say, we got to do this system. This is how it works. And so we would be excited about it and we would try to implement what they did. And so one particular one that I recall, I tried it both as a continuous improvement leader and as a plant manager, and neither time did it really take. So it was something called Kamishibai. So it was basically an audit that you would do to kind of check up on the system, because I talk about this a lot in leadership, but when we implement something new, it is difficult to do and we have to reinforce that change. We have to follow up, right? So this is just a leadership skill. So this Kamishibai was a great way to kind of check that the systems were working, and a great audit from top management to go around. It purposely made them chat with all the team members on the floor. It allowed us to check systems and to give feedback. So we would there was the concept was these cards, and they were red or green, and somebody would go and check the card each day, ask certain questions, and then come back and make it red or green. And so the idea is that you would real time fix it and then move on. So it worked wonderfully in the facility in which we copied it from. And we would call this R&D, or rob and deploy. So I robbed it and we attempted to deploy it for many reasons that I'm going to discuss with you today. It did not work the same. It didn't work for us and it didn't work. So I know that as a leader, as a site continuous improvement leader, as a plant manager, as a human being with 2 kids that don't always do the things that I try to implement with them, change doesn't always work, especially when we just copy it from others. So what that can leave us to is it can leave us to feeling like, why can't I make this work? Why does this always fail for me? Clearly, that wasn't a good system, so it's not going to work here either. But there are really actually some very clear reasons why it doesn't work. And what I want to share with you today is what those reasons are and what we can do to make our R&D or Rob and deploy systems work better. So let's dig into this. All right. So the reasons that in my story, the reasons that they didn't work are because it was an add-on. It was more things that we were doing without taking something away. We tried to just throw it on top of everything else we were doing. So what we didn't, if we weren't solving a problem, it didn't feel purposeful. So when you're adding something on that doesn't do anything for you or doesn't seem to do anything for you, when you're not tying it to a problem that is real and tangible and people are really bought into, it doesn't stick because the motivation isn't there. Number two, it didn't work. We were trying to take version like 10.0 and implement it in our facility. So, we were more concerned sometimes with the aesthetics of it and, having the right questions than just the habit of checking and saying yes or no. Hey, having the board up is a great way to make sure that you're doing your job, right? But we were more tied up in the aesthetics of it and trying to do their version 10.0 than taking a step back and starting to build the habits slowly and starting with iteration 1. When you're not doing those things, you're not bought in. And so both as the people doing it or the leader leading it, if nobody's bought in, it's going to fall off the wayside, basically. And so what we didn't do in those times is we didn't take stock of where we were today, which is such a huge thing in goal setting, system creation, system implementation. You need to understand where you are today so that you can make a step change that is sustainable. So this is why crash diets don't work long term. This is why a lot of people in my family are doing keto, and I'm like, it's not sustainable. It's like, yes, you're gonna do great for a month, and then you're gonna cheat a little bit, and then you're gonna cheat a little bit more, and then next thing you know, you're eating pasta dinners with beer, and you're not doing keto anymore, right? So it's not sustainable if you try to do too much, and that's another problem when you try to implement somebody else's version 10 and you're not even ready for version 2 yet. Understanding where you are today, making sure you're solving the problem and making sure where you're bought into where you are, it's all part of this change management thing. So ultimately what we need to do is, even if we're taking a system and copying it, the part that we've taken away is, if you think of the widget, so think of Working Genius, what we've taken away is the I. But what we sometimes forget and what we think we don't have to do anymore is G and then the ET, kind of like the wrapping it all up, right? So we sometimes miss the D part too, right? So we need to make sure we still use all of our systems in place. So, okay, we've got somebody who's maybe like asked a question and come up with this system that we're going to use. But we still need to, in our own facility, ask ourselves these questions, see what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and then create it based on this cool idea, roll it out, follow up, and continue to support it and iterate it to make it our own, not a carbon copy of what we saw. Okay, so this works for visual systems, this works for processes, this works for books you might read, but this is the reason that coaching becomes so critical. And really the way that I do coaching and leadership training and everything else with my clients is because of this exact reason. It's because it's difficult to just read a concept and then say, kaboom. Because you have to break it down, you have to simplify it, and you have to make it work for you, for who you are, for who your team is, and how your team functions so that it works and everybody's bought in. All right, so let's go through some really clear things and reasons why it might not work and then what we're going to do about it. Okay, so the biggest things to remember are, number one, it's still a change. Right. So when you're thinking about doing a change, whether it's a copied solution or something you've created through brainstorming with your own team, you're still going to go through all of the same emotions and people situations. Like, it still has to do with people and people changing habits. So just because you're saying, okay, we're going to implement this cool card system that all we have to do is show up in the morning, grab the card, go check the thing, and then do the, help them fix it or say great job. And like, that seems simple and straightforward and it's visual and it's cool, but we're still changing behaviors. Because when people show up in the morning, they have their things that they've been doing for, 5, 10, 15, 20 years already. If you're asking them to now change their habit or add something in, you have to be aware that that is hard for them. So I love to think of this, I have this visual in my head when people try to change. So if you think of like a wheel rolling into a groove, right? So there's a very clear groove that this wheel has just, continuously been operating in. So it's, really ingrained in there. But now you're asking people to shift and drive their wheel outside of the groove, just slightly outside maybe. And it's really easy for that wheel to fall right back into that groove. So if we don't keep that in mind, if we think, I told them, therefore they're going to do it, we're going to be disappointed. I see this with my kids all the time. I say, okay, we're all going to clean up dinner and we're all going to, do these things. And it's real easy for them to go and want to go flop on the couch while mom sits and cleans up dinner. And it's easy for me to fall into that because sometimes, I might listen to something on my phone, or I might, just enjoy the quiet and not have to be like, do this, do this, do this. If I want that system to stick, I have to say, no, you're not doing that. Get up, come out over here. So you have to keep coming back to the new groove and driving that new groove, supporting the new groove that they're trying to wear into really their brain connections. So this is how our brains work. So this isn't like, something outside of natural behavior. Like this is how brains operate. And we have these natural grooves already into our minds, and we are essentially rewiring them anytime we implement any kind of change. Skipped the problem clarity. So what that means is you haven't clearly associated the problem that you might be experiencing with the solution that you're trying to implement, or the other way around, because you're seeing this cool solution, you haven't related the solution to a problem that feels important. Okay, so this kind of comes back to what I've been talking about, is that what's the most important thing right now? So a lot of times there is a solution to a problem that we're implementing, and that is the most important thing, or a future problem that's coming in that needs to be resolved. And that is why we're doing this solution. But when you start like tacking things on that just feel extra, you're not only distracting and trying to implement something that's like doesn't feel important, but you're actually detracting from the thing that's most important right now as well. And that can be like double lose, because now you've got too many things happening. You get caught into this like flavor of the month sort of mentality. And this most important thing isn't necessarily most important anymore. So you need to come back and understand, okay, really cool solution. What problem is it solving for me? So is it solving we have things not working right, or people not following processes right at the cell level or the manufacturing cell level, or like, is it solving that? Is it solving chronic safety problems, that sort of thing? Like, what is it solving that you're needing to work on right now? So taking a look back at these Kamishibai systems, what we really should have done is focused it in one area and said, okay, we are very focused on launching of this new product, and we're all learning something new, and we're going to go and see this one cell on a regular basis. And we'll, like maybe two of us start and we go together, because now we got a partner to make sure that we do it together rather than hoping everyone's going to change perfectly, do all these things all at the same time. So go together, check on things together and fix them, have conversations, see what's going on, make it more about the visibility and the recognition than it is about fixing problems. Sometimes you have to take a step back from what your ultimate solution is and say, okay, what's this hump I have to get over? What's the thing that's going to get in my way most about this? So for many of us, it's that adding one more thing. So how can we get in the habit of going and seeing before we now start saying, now I have to go, what I'm going to do is find a problem, and then I'm going to have to spend all morning trying to fix it when I have like all these other things to do. So that can be problematic, right? That's a deterrent. So trying to shape it a little bit so we just get in the habit first of doing part of it. I've talked about this a lot for myself when I try to work out in the mornings. What I would find is that there would be so many barriers to working out. So I used to like run outside, meet others at, this certain time, but I would struggle getting out of bed. So I had to practice getting up at that time first. And once I got a little bit used to getting up on time, then I could add in, like what's a stretching routine or something small. And then I could start doing more. But like I could never get to, well, I could for a while, but that getting out and getting dressed to go outside in the cold and run, like there was way too many roadblocks in the way. So I put that aside and I started doing indoor weightlifting workouts that didn't feel as hard or as so many barriers in the way to do on my own. So you have to start to adjust for what works for you. So because, I had friends that could meet at 4:45 and do an hour run outside no matter what weather. There was too many barriers for me, so that didn't work for me. So therefore, I found ways to practice the small, tiny steps and then continue to grow them. And then I ultimately changed the system that I implemented to something different. So similar concept here. All right. And this comes back to number 3 thing of you skipped the iterations. All right. So I talked about, we're trying to implement this version 10 of somebody's system when we haven't even done version 1. So first of all, you have to get the buy-in on the problem like we talked about, but we really need to buy into what the solution is as well. So when we try to implement version 10, there might be things that are like feeling like they're being done to us. So a lot of times when people say, you must do this, especially you work in a corporate environment, things get rolled down and you have to do it a certain way. There's a lot of that because, again, you're taking version 10 from some other facility and trying to implement it here. So again, understanding where am I today? And then making sure we're solving a problem that means something to us. But then those iterations are so important because really what they are is they're that learning process. They're the practicing of the habit, but they're also making it your own. And I've touched on this, but we've talked a lot about ownership and people owning something. When they get to own the solution and iterate it and make it their own, make it work for them, there is so much value in that. There is so much value in, okay, there was an idea, it was solving a problem, but we created the system. Saying I own it and then I get to make it what works for me. Like that is a huge part of it. So as a leader, whether you're getting something rolled down to you from corporate or you saw something really cool or your colleague who also owns a business talked about something that really worked well for them, no matter what it is, what you can do is you can bring the idea into your team. As long as it's associated to a problem, say, hey, we've been having this problem, we've been struggling. I found this idea somewhere else. Let's discuss it. Let's see how we can make it meet our needs. So what you're doing is you're actually saying, here's an idea. I want to get to the outcome that this team has achieved. I want to get to where a system solves the problems we're having. Okay, I want to get to that. But here's an idea. Let's look at it. Let's see if we can make this idea work for us, or let's see if there is some concept that this idea is doing for us that we can take and then deploy into ours. So doing that from the get-go is huge. But then being able to say, okay, we're going to try this. And then, okay, but this works, but this doesn't. So now let's adjust and let's come up with something. So all of those iteration versions make people own it. They make them proud of the system, which makes the buy-in happen. And even better, once the buy-in happens with this initial team, when they train their new team members about it, they're excited. They're saying this works for us because we did this and because we did that. And it becomes that much more sustainable because now the peers are training each other better. They're holding each other accountable better. And it works better, right? They're there more. People sometimes really like peer pressure, right? Or peer pressure does work. And this is a positive version of peer pressure when we're using it to help support the systems that we're trying to put in place. And finally, as I mentioned through this Kamishibai thing, the 4th thing that gets in the way is we sometimes prioritize perfection over functional. So what that really means is that, yes, systems might be pretty, but once again, just like the iteration thing, there is value in doing it by hand. So think back to when you learned how to do long division, right? Maybe some of you didn't, I don't know. But when you learned how to do long division, there was a value in understanding the steps and understanding that process and why they want you to show your work and that sort of thing. There's a value in doing it by hand, doing it from scratch, roughing it in, because now you can get the process honed in better. I have seen so many people have a really cool technology solution that, okay, we're going to make this work. And when we do it, it's going to work. It doesn't, because there is no buy-in to it, because they didn't kind of feel the pain and understand how this perfect system is going to actually work and benefit them. I used to see that a lot in what we call lost time analysis or downtime tracking. So it's very valuable to track when your machines go down so you can then problem solve and fix those reasons. There were so many new solutions coming out as I was exiting manufacturing as to how to automatically do that, which is really cool if people are already in the habit or understand some of the basic reasons that they're down. But when you're just like inputting stuff into a computer and it gets faster to just pick the first one, and there's no value seen to that operator to getting it right or clarifying what each of these reasons really mean or any of these things, that the technology part escapes you versus handwriting it out and seeing it real time marked instead of all at the end of the shift or any of those reasons. Like doing it by hand first grows the ownership and grows that buy-in to the system. So ultimately, what we want to remember, it is fantastic to see great ideas, see things that other people are doing, and pull out the full R&D process. But the big part that we don't want to miss is the D, the deploy. So R&D, if you don't remember, is rob and deploy. We don't want to miss the deploy. So great leaders aren't just copying systems. They are taking the systems and these great ideas that they're seeing from other people, and they're making them work for them, for their team, and for their environment. And that is done by still treating it like a change, working through those iterations, tying it to a very real problem that you're suffering with, and getting people on board and giving them that ownership. If you found today's episode helpful, please like it, share it with a friend, give people this information, because it's going to help. It's going to help the leader feel like, oh, I'm not a failure. I'm just, not treating it like a real change. It's going to help them be more successful and have a better business and life. So if you liked the episode, like it, share it with a friend, leave a comment on the YouTube, and we will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.